What is going on, beautiful people of YouTube? What you are about to experience is a dialogue that is just under an hour between myself and a lady called Samantha George. A very, very good friend of mine from days gone by, and who is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know regarding everything to do with gut health. The reason that this is a subject that I'm so passionate about now is there have been a couple of tweaks that I've made over the last few years to my diet and my gut that have made an absolute world of a difference to my fitness, my performance, my health, my physique, my cognition, my general energy, my sleep, everything. So whereas in the world of training, I feel anyway, my experience is that you can make a couple of tiny little tweaks and you'll get a tiny little bit better. Whereas I've seen both within myself and a few of my clients and my friends, a couple of people that I know have made a few tiny little amendments to their diet that then changes what's going on in their gut, and they get a disproportionately massive reaction to all of those things that I just mentioned: health, sleep, performance, physique, everything. And what you're about to hear now is about an hour's worth of Samantha George telling us how we can make some of that wisdom and some of that knowledge and make it nice and applicable to us so that we can get the benefits from that. Without further ado, sit back, relax, soak up the knowledge and enjoy. We have one mic.
Bro,
We have one microphone because A, I think I like symmetry, and B, I'm too cheap
works.
to buy a second one.
I'm quite loud, it's fine.
Well, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Don't scream too much over me. You'll make me sound feminine. Just receding into the background.
And what's wrong with being feminine, huh?
Absolutely nothing.
Good.
Absolutely nothing. I own my femininity, thank you. You can't tell right now, but I'm wearing a skirt under here. Should we go?
Let's go.
Cool. Samantha George, Sammy G. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making the trip. How long did it take you to get here?
About 50 minutes, although I almost ran out of petrol on the way because I did not check, so I did have to stop and get petrol.
You just live on the edge, didn't you?
I know.
You absolute maverick. So we are here to, in addition to catch up, because obviously we're old friends, to chat about all things related to gut health specifically. So the purpose of my channel, one of the reasons, actually, I will give a bit of context on this, that I think this is so important and this is so relevant for me, is I've made tweaks to everything to attempt to improve my performance, fitness, physique, recovery, general health, everything. And there have been a couple of nutritional tweaks that I've made in the form of going gluten-free and in the form of intermittent fasting that have probably been the two biggest things I've ever done for my health. So I'm 33 now. It was about 10 years ago that I was in the Marines, about 8 years ago that I was a GB athlete, and I feel better within myself now in terms of regulated energy and everything since making those changes than I did then. So I am aware that gut health is kind of the linchpin of everything, and that's what I think we should chat about now.
Yeah, I agree. Gut health is basically linked to everything. But I'm interested to know what you got from going gluten-free and intermittent fasting.
Okay, so gluten-free, which kind of happened first, because I was intermittent fasting a little bit. A couple of my buddies spoke about it, but I didn't really do an awful. I didn't do it particularly consistently.
Okay.
Going gluten-free was a massive game changer for kind of regulated energy. So not feeling like stimulated, like you just had a coffee, but just feeling kind of awake and kind of appropriately kind of satiated. Mental health as well, in terms of a general feeling of kind of like an undertone of, not depression. I mean, it is I wouldn't say it was as, I'd be lying if I said it was as kind of as severe as that, but of just, I don't know, of just feeling emotionally slightly subpar. And that was kind of constant. And going gluten-free massively helped with that. Bloating is a huge thing. I was basically 14 months pregnant for most of my life with my belly button about 6 inches further forward than my pecs. And I was like, I'm pretty sure not only men, humans aren't supposed to do all of this. So yeah, both in terms of appearance, like my core muscles I felt worked better. So when I was squatting and deadlifting and things like that, I felt a lot less sore. And then I was like, and that's what kind of led me down the road of flipping heck, man. This is like literally linked to everything.
Yeah, so that's really similar to my story because I've had gut issues pretty much since I was born. As in, like, my mum as a baby was taking me to the doctor going, I'm sure she shouldn't be this swollen all the time. And the doctors were like, no, it's fine, she's a baby.
Please feed my beach ball and somehow fix this.
So I've obviously for the last, 16 years now, been diving into nutrition and health and everything to try and solve my own problems, and then discovered a whole load of tools that will help other people too. But the bloating is one that I've had for years. Touch wood, it's very much under control at the moment. But I know the feeling when you get on a train and somebody gets up and gives you their seat and you're like,
oh, that's brutal.
Do I tell them I'm not actually pregnant? I'm just really bloated because I ate something that didn't agree with me.
But I'm also bloated and I kind of want to sit down, so I'll take it.
It's really handy. If you're ever tired and you want a seat on a train.
Use that. Yeah, I think I'm less likely to get a free seat than you are, strangely enough.
Well, you never know. People might think
it was pretty big. It was pretty big. Okay, cool. So in terms of, obviously, this is such an expansive topic.
Yep.
You've got so comprehensive. Even, a fraction of 1% of this stuff we could do a deep dive on, and that could take us a couple of hours. But what I want to do is just try to keep it as concise as possible. And we're only able, kind of in one sitting, to go over a very, very high level, kind of like scratch the surface thing. So if we can we chat about a couple of things that are super generic in their applicability to people. So a couple of things in terms of, obviously we spoke kind of when we were catching up about this before about, talk about what, how, when, why in regards to food, and speaking in generalities, what stuff affects most people, and then what things can be done to help most people.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, let's start there in that case, because the most common symptoms that I see are acid reflux and heartburn, GERD, bloating, like we were just talking about. Chronic constipation is a really big thing that nobody seems to be talking about. Alternating constipation and diarrhea, or just chronic diarrhea. And those 5 things, were they 5?
Yeah, 4 fingers and a thumb is 5. Yeah. Got it.
Those 5 things are...
Amazing with gut health. Maths less so.
Blonde. Yeah, so those 5 things are really, really common, but not normal, and loads of people seem to think that they're normal things. It's like, oh, it's fine, it doesn't
Everyone
matter
gets that.
if I don't have a bowel movement every day. Yeah, that's just normal. That's just how my body works. No, that's not just how your body works. Your body's not working properly. It's telling you something, and it's trying to get your attention that there's something that needs addressing there. But if we look after everything, like you said, the what, when, how, why, in terms of food and lifestyle, then it's really easy to correct 90% of things. There are some underlying things that obviously are a bit more complex, and that's where the functional medicine and everything comes in. But in terms of general nutrition and lifestyle, there's a lot that we can do.
Such as? Let's go through food.
So, all right, let's start with food. What we eat, funnily enough, impacts our gut big time.
What? Mind blowing.
So we've got the microbiome is basically like the ecology of the gut. So it's a system of bacteria that do all sorts for us. So they produce vitamins, as an example. So things like our vitamins K and A and some of our B vitamins can actually come from bacteria more than they do from our food or our cells. So they work synergistically with us. It is this symbiotic relationship. But if we don't take care of that microbiome, all of those bacteria, they can get out of balance and we can start having problems. Easiest way to think about it is the Amazon has a massive effect on the planet, right? So the climate, water, gases of the atmosphere, the air we breathe, all of that is impacted by the Amazon. The more of that we cut down, the more of the general environment we screw up. It's exactly the same.
Right.
Our microbiome is basically our own little personal Amazon. So if we don't look after it properly, we can end up in a position where all sorts of different things start going wrong globally within the body. A lot of the time we think of these things as just being like a specific gut thing, like we were talking about, like heartburn or diarrhea or something, but actually things like you were saying, anxiety, depression, brain fog, aches and pains, energy issues can all be related to gut health as well, and not looking after that microbiome properly. And the best way we can look after the microbiome is by eating a diet made up of single ingredient whole foods with a great deal of variety, basically.
Okay.
So if it's coming in a packet, if it's got a list of ingredients, don't have it so much. If it's something that's fresh, like if you're going to go pick up a tomato or a pepper or something, chances are it's probably going to be better. Everybody is individual in terms of what they need to eat. None of us are the same on the inside, just in the same way that we're not the same on the outside. So there isn't one specific diet that works for anyone, but by having a general variety and lots of fruits, vegetables, lean meats, good quality fattier meats as well, fish, seafood, like all your single ingredient natural foods basically, is going to give you a really good starting point.
So what each individual needs will be different, but the overarching principle of having single ingredients of a high quality and vary that as much as you can, so to kind of, you know, to get a variety and kind of diversify your microbiome. That as a principle is one very applicable thing that people can do to improve what they eat and what's going on in their microbiome.
And the quality is really important when it comes to the microbiome as well. Because if you are eating foods that have been sprayed with pesticides and fungicides, or you're eating animal products that have been fed antibiotics and things like that, then you are going to be damaging your microbiome. Antibiotics are one of the worst things we can do for the microbiome.
Right, okay. So I don't know if this is me kind of being cynical or not, and I don't know whether this is accurate or not. I'm sure you will do more than I do. In regards to getting foods that are of that superior quality, how easy is it to get that? I mean, what is the difference between regular kind of vegetables in a supermarket and the organic stuff in a supermarket versus local farm shop versus certain delivery companies that you might be aware of? Like, what is the difference in standard?
Okay, so standard supermarket vegetables are probably going to have been sprayed with herbicides, fungicides and pesticides to make them grow quicker. That means they're going to have less nutrients. The soil that they've come from is going to be depleted of nutrients, so it's naturally going to have less. Plus it's got these extra toxins that in these tiny microdoses have been proven not to have an effect on the body, but none of us are just going to eat like one pepper and that's it for the rest of our lives, right? We're taking in these doses constantly all the time, and that can all start to accumulate in the body, and like we say, then affect the microbiome as well, in terms of changing the diversity of bacteria there, which then changes all sorts of other things that go on in the body. So that is going to be like the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to food quality. The higher end would be organic, because then it's not been sprayed with all the stuff, so that's really good.
Is it a big difference?
Yeah,
okay.
In terms of the actual mineral content of the soil that it's come from, if we take something like magnesium, which has been shown in the last, where are we now, 50 years, to have been depleted by about 70%, don't quote me on that, in our soils. Like, our soils just don't have the level of magnesium that they had in the 70s, basically. And that has just been declining over and over and over again because of the way we're farming. So we can't get the nutrients from the food. Therefore, we're having to eat a lot more of the food to try and get the nutrients. And it's one of the reasons why people struggle with overeating as well, because they're not getting the nutrients they need.
So their body is telling them to eat more,
exactly.
Because it doesn't really care about calories. It just wants these nutrients and it's not getting enough of them.
Yeah, precisely.
So if somebody was to make the switch between kind of normal vegetables in a supermarket and either organic in a supermarket or organic from a farm shop, are they actually going to feel a difference? Obviously the inside is working better. Are they going to know? Because a lot of people, it's like proprioceptively, they might take it for a week and be like, I don't think I feel any different, and then they might just think they develop this narrative that is not having a positive effect. So could they expect to see a difference?
That depends on how in touch you are with your body.
Right.
I find a massive difference in certain vegetables in the taste. I tried eating non-organic carrots a little while ago and I was like, these are water. There's nothing in these. They're horrible. I see a massive difference in taste. Obviously, if they're in season, that's going to help in terms of nutrient content, but also in taste as well. So that makes a big difference. But the best thing to do is try it. Try it and see. See if you sleep any better, see if your energy is any better. I'd say give it probably about 3 weeks before you make up your mind, because it is going to take a little while. But experiment and see. The problem with organic food is that it does tend to be more expensive.
Yep.
So that's obviously a barrier there as well, in which case I've still never come across a UK version, but the US have you heard of the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen?
I have not.
Okay, so the Dirty Dozen are 12 of the most pesticide sprayed foods.
Right, okay.
So if you are only going to partly eat organic, buy those 12 foods organic.
Right.
And the clean 15 are the ones that generally aren't so bad. They don't take in as many of the toxins and they tend to maintain their
So it's going to be the least difference, basically.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So if you're on a budget, clean 15, buy non-organic, dirty dozen, buy organic.
Okay, cool. So that's a properly wicked applicable tip of literally making that change, and it is more expensive, and I understand that is a barrier to entry. I'm pretty mercenary with it though, and I'm like, I don't understand what is worth your money more than this stuff.
Yeah.
So like I'm like born without the flipping sympathy gene. So when people are gobbing off, I'm like, well, I can't afford to buy my greens or whatever organic, and then they're walking around in like a Gant t-shirt. I'm like, you're a moron. Yeah. Harsh words, but you understand the general premise of like, it needs to be, I think, in addition to thinking about it just in isolation, generally the quality of the food that you put in your body needs to go, for some people, it might be a benefit to reassess whether or not it needs to go higher up the list of priorities for your spending. Yeah,
the other way of looking at it is if you break it down per nutrient per pence that you're spending, it actually isn't more expensive. If anything, it's probably going to end up cheaper.
Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it.
So, and again, it's what are your priorities? Is it the clothes you're wearing? Is it how you're feeling? If you want to feel good and you want to be healthy and happy and live a long, fulfilling life, then yeah, you're better off spending your money on organic foods.
Yeah, good. So if somebody did make that switch, is making that switch good enough, or is there anything they can do to kind of combine that transition with taking something or doing something or a certain protocol, certain supplement that would help cleanse their body of all the crap that they had built up over the last however long that they weren't eating organically?
There are supplements that you can take. If your body is working properly, you probably don't need to.
Because it would just get it out.
Let your detox system do what it's supposed to do, essentially. If you've had, you can do lymphatic support and things like that as well. But if you are living a healthy lifestyle and you haven't had chronic illnesses for years or something, your body should be able to do its own thing. Like, you can always help it, you can always support it more, but I don't think it's necessary.
But just give it time and let it do most of the work.
Exactly.
Okay, wicked. So I heard recently, and I can't flipping remember where this was, but someone said, it was on the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he said that have you heard of this?
No.
A guy called Chris Williamson, and he was interviewing a guy that is like a chef for specifically for like performance, so for sports performance, and he said if there's one thing that you're going to transition into eating organically, it should be your meat.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is it's like like with what you said earlier, the amount of antibiotics and stuff are just like is like poison. And he said that is the biggest thing you can do. The thing that is most worth an increase in investment from you is begin eating organic meats. Would you agree with that?
Completely. Yep. And eggs. I'd throw in and milk.
Eggs.
All animal products, basically. Fish and seafood is slightly different. I wouldn't go for organic with those. But organic meats, yeah, especially the fattier cuts. If you're going to eat fattier meats, like you want your steak or your rack of lamb or your pork belly or something like that, yeah, organic.
Why especially the fat? Does the antibiotics like pool in the fat?
Yes, exactly. So all mammals, including us humans, store excess toxins in our fat cells. When it's too much and the liver's overloaded and we can't detoxify at the rate that the toxins are coming in, we put them into our fat cells for storage for later. So if you're going to go and eat something like, pork belly is the fattiest cut I can think of at the moment. If you're going to go and eat something like that, you are going to literally be eating all the toxins that pig has had to shunt into its fat cells.
Okay.
So 100%.
So if you're going to start eating organic something, say you've got a budget that can allow you to make a transition in one area, it should be your meats, especially the fattier meats.
100%.
Fantastic.
Yes. With fish and seafood, I'd go for wild caught over organic, because organic has to be farmed in order for us to be able to label it organic. Because if you get a wild fish, you have no idea what it's eaten, you can't give it an organic label. It could have eaten anything while it's been in the sea, right? So organic fish are always farmed fish, which most of the time means that they don't have enough space to swim around properly to develop their muscle mass, which means the ratio of omega-3s and 6s isn't quite what it should be, and that can cause some inflammation as well.
Which is, and I promise there will be, I can't promise this at all actually, that was going to be complete bullshit. Assuming there's not going to be like some massive corporate SWAT team that are going to come and kill you after this interview. Which supermarket, which high street supermarket do you think is the best one for, it, again, speaking in generalities, for providing the best quality food?
Oh, this is a tough one.
It's the gritty stuff, isn't it? This is why you're here.
I would go between Sainsbury's and Waitrose.
Sainsbury's and Waitrose, okay.
Yeah. Purely because they're the ones that I've managed to find on shelf, grass-fed meats quite easily, and wild-caught fish. You have to flip it over, look at the packet, look at where it's come from and everything. But in those two, I've managed to find them, whereas in other supermarkets, I never have.
There we go.
They usually have a decent organic selection as well. Okay. I find that Sainsbury's has got a better, in general, more organic fruit and veg than Waitrose has, but Waitrose tends to have better meat and fish.
Fantastic. Well, we only have two supermarkets here in East Grinstead, which are Sainsbury's and Waitrose, because we are that middle class in this town. Okay, well that's good to know.
My tiny little village only has a Waitrose. Don't worry
about
it.
There we go. Living the dream. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, cool. So, do you have any other quick tips on what to eat and how? Do you see any kind of common trends of this is a thing that so many people are getting wrong, and if they just made that slight tweak, it would have a massive effect?
I think most people are eating too many grains.
Too many grains.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I've recently gone a lot more paleo.
Yeah.
And that's been my first kind of interview setup like this was with a company called Hunter and Gather.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
they do really nice mayonnaise.
They do phenomenal mayonnaise, don't they? Amy and Jeff, if you're watching, there you go. You got another fan. Yeah, they're wicked. Absolutely wicked people. Phenomenally emotionally attached to their vision of getting people eating better, and it is. And you know they were great, and obviously they were. I think literally from the day that I left, I was like, I just went completely full paleo. Didn't even have any vegetable oils in any of the anything. And it was good. Okay, so you think people are eating too many grains? In what form? How much do you think they can have? Again,
this is different. Everybody has a different amount of fats, proteins and carbs that they need in order to thrive. And I can't say you need that or you need that. It's up to us to listen to our body, and our body's always feeding back to us over and over again. Like, that worked, that didn't work. The problem is we've all been taught not to listen to that. So ever since we were kids, and it's like, you know, your mum puts your dinner down in front of you or whoever and says, like, no, eat what's on your plate. Like, I don't care. You need to eat what's there. Or you might be hungry in the middle of school. And no, it's not lunch break yet. You can't go and eat at the moment. So we've been psychologically dampening down that communication ever since we were children, and then wonder why we're not in touch enough with our bodies to know what it needs and what it doesn't need. So rebuilding that communication is the most powerful thing I think any of us can do. But that communication will tell us how much we can cope with in terms of grains. Some people can manage a lot more. I'm slightly biased because I am rubbish on grains, and so I would be like full paleo very easily and have no problem with that. Some people do really well on whole grains, and they're fine with very minimally processed stuff. But in general, from what we see, looking at people across the board, most people are eating a lot of grains and a lot of processed grain foods, like your breads and your pastas and your cakes and your biscuits and all those things. And then anytime they're not, they're having pastas and rices and corns and all those kind of things with each meal as well. And most of us probably don't need it at every meal. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that Amy, I remember, said in the, in my meeting with her, is she said even back in the day when we were having like fermented and sprouted grains, people still struggled then, let alone now when they're kind of this processed crap that we've got. One of the things that I did hear from I think this is years ago actually. Oh no, I'll tell you who it was. It was on an interview, and it was Paul Check.
Oh yeah.
And one thing he said every Caucasian person is gluten intolerant to a degree. Like, there's a spectrum, because it took X amount of time to get to Europe. I don't know if you've ever heard this. Is this something that you're familiar with? Like, there is, because there must be a difference in whether or not it's kind of, you know, chart, like the implications are heavily loaded or whatever, but there must be a difference in what different people need depending on their ancestry and their ethnicity. Is there?
So this is the concept behind metabolic typing.
Right.
If you've come across that before.
I have.
Yeah, okay. So the idea of metabolic typing is that, again, we all need something different from one another, but some of that will be based on our lineage, and it tends to be people closer to the equator. If your last few dozen ancestors have come from an area closer to the equator, chances are you're going to be more of a carb type, which doesn't necessarily mean starches, carbs. We're talking about fruits and veggies are carbs as well. So you are generally going to need more of a carb type. Think about like a typical Indian diet as an example. Whereas if you are from polar regions, chances are you're
not much is growing up there, so they're just eating walrus
a
instead.
lot more fat and meat than anybody closer to the equator. So the problem with that is that none of us seem to have a direct lineage anymore.
Yeah.
We're all from everywhere.
Everyone's
right?
mixed type.
Yeah.
To a degree.
I say this, I did a genetic test a couple of years ago now, thinking that I was going to be like, I've got
woman of the world, 1% of each.
Awesome, like great Latino traits or something in me, and yeah, I know you're laughing at me because I'm blonde and pale and think that I might be Latin or African. It came back, I am 92% British.
Oh no, that's
I'm
not
possibly
what anyone,
the most
that's not what any kind of
British
adventurous
person
traveller wants to hear.
I have ever met.
So what would that mean then? So if you're heavily British ancestry, what would that indicate?
Most
with
of
your
my
diet?
ancestry is Welsh, so it's all basically meat, fish, a lot of fish and seafood I do well on, lower starch vegetables with the odd starchy veg in here and there, and that tends to work really well for me, and that fits with metabolic typing, looking back through my ancestry and things as well.
Okay, and so your kind of carb input is from fruits and vegetables, and now and again a starchy vegetable, but no grains. You don't have any grains?
I occasionally have a little bit of gluten-free bread if I've been training really hard.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is that because you think it does well for you, or because it's like, oh, treat? Okay.
Yeah, it's partially a treat and partially just because if I've been training a lot, I really need the starch. So I need some quick release. But it's not like a health food. It's just once a week I can have a little bit of bread and it not be detrimental.
How can people access this information? Obviously you and me are in kind of the fitness, health and wellness space, and we've been exposed to a lot more kind of holistic ideals, like we just mentioned Paul Chek, we mentioned metabolic typing. This stuff is getting more contemporary now, but even 5 years ago, you're talking to like some of the top PTs in London, they'd never even heard of this guy, and Paul Chek's one of the most prolific researchers of this stuff ever. How would people act if someone was like, I want to find out a little bit more about my body type and what I should be, like they're listening to us kind of chat and they're like, the concept sounds wicked, I want to find out a little bit more about my body type, what my heritage is, and then how that would affect what I need to put in my body, because I want to improve everything we've just mentioned: cognition, energy, sleep, performance, recovery, etc. How can they access that information?
Well, the first thing they could do is come to me. This is what I coach people through. Little
plug. Perfect.
Otherwise, you mentioned Paul Chek, his book How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy. It's like the Bible.
It is the
book.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Or if you want to dive further into metabolic typing, Bill Walcott's got a book called The Metabolic Typing Diet. That's quite a nice one to look through as well.
Nice.
All the same principles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, fantastic. So, is there anything else on? I don't know if we're going to get through all of these, but is there anything else on what people should be eating that we could cover?
Just variety.
Variety.
Like we've already mentioned.
Diversify.
Variety. Yes, our body needs a range of nutrients. This is one thing that I see all the time. In fact, there were studies done about this a few years back, and it came out that the majority of people eat between 12 and 16 foods a week. Yeah,
I spoke to a couple of my clients about this during lockdown. So I had we had a Q&A once every 2 weeks, and we spoke to a couple of people, and they were like, and they said it's kind of something similar. They were like, yeah, I probably eat the same. Like there's 10 ingredients that I get from the supermarket once a week, but every week they get the same 10. And I'm like, so you haven't had an 11th ingredient in a year? It's like, it's insane.
Yeah, trying to get as much colour and as much variety into your food as possible is always a good thing to do. Okay. Yeah.
Good news. In terms of let's talk about that. I mean, one of the other nutritional tweaks, nearly lost the mic then. That could have been devastating.
Sorry.
I know, that's my bad. One of the other tweaks that I've made, which has really, really helped me, actually, is carb backloading. So I have high protein, high fat for kind of usually when I break my fast, about between midday and 1. I then have something that has some blueberries or a banana in. That's kind of my carb input after training. And then I have like some starchy veg, like a sweet potato or like squash or something in the evening. But having the vast majority of my daily carbs in the evening seems to work quite well for me. Is that something that you've seen a trend with?
Again, it's individual. I'm smiling because if you think back to about 4 or 5 years ago in the fitness world, the rule was always don't eat carbs at night.
Yeah, no,
don't
yeah,
have any
yeah.
starch at night. It'll make you get fat.
Everything that we were taught seems to be like you've got to have 19 meals through the day
Yeah.
with 16-minute intervals. It's like
And
the
for some
opposite of what I do now.
But for some people, that's a really good thing. For some people, you do need to eat very frequently to manage blood sugar. For other people, you can do really well on intermittent fasting. It completely depends on your body, your lifestyle, your training, your age, and majority of the time, your stress. So the amount of load your body is under will determine whether something like intermittent fasting becomes a stress or whether it is a positive change.
Whether it's medicine or a stressor, that's interesting. So how so? If you are more stressed, would it make intermittent fasting better or worse?
Much worse.
Much worse?
Yes. So if we take, like, imagine you've got a 51-year-old woman who's going through the menopause. She's raising 3 kids, working a corporate job, and is under loads of pressure from all these different areas and is trying to balance everything.
Yeah.
Her blood sugar levels are already going to be impacted by the amount of stress that she's under. You get her to go for long periods of time without food. If she can plow through and do it for a long period of time, eventually it might help her with her blood sugar levels. But in the short term, not at all. It's just going to make her do this. Her blood sugar levels are going to drop. Her stress hormones are going to have to come in to pick up her blood sugar levels, which means she's more stressed and more anxious throughout the day. It's going to exacerbate her hot flashes. It's going to make her feel rubbish and super emotional all the time. Like, it's not going to be a great thing for her to do at all. And it's just going to cause her to get lethargic, emotional, and fat, basically. You know, the 3 things we all want.
Well, I was about to say, yeah, they sound like 3 very, very bad symptoms, especially at that phase of life anyway. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Take a 20-year-old guy who is living at home with his parents in quite an easy job, working his way up the ladder, having a good time, enjoying himself, very little stress. Give him some intermittent fasts and he will probably do great on them. So men in general do better than women do.
I'm familiar with that idea. I mean, I listen to a lot of, Ben Greenfield?
Yep.
Yeah, so I've heard Ben Greenfield talk to, I want to say Daniel Pomper. I might have completely made that flipping name up. But another, obviously, Ben Greenfield, incredibly intelligent guy, exercise physiologist in training, but, biohacking extraordinaire. And he was talking to a guy that is a fasting expert, and he said that 16-8 as an example being a typical kind of intermittent fasting protocol of you eat in an 8-hour eating window between, as an example, midday and 8 p.m. and then you have a 16-hour fasting window. He said 16 hours is the maximum that you'd want for a woman to fast, kind of across a range of ages actually. So I'm aware that it has more of a benefit for men. Is there a way, the benefits that fasting gives, is there a different protocol that women can try if 16-8 might not be the best thing for them?
12-12.
12-12, as simple as that?
Yeah,
Okay.
You need a 12-hour fast according to all the science to be able to get the benefits of autophagy, which is cell renewal, right? So if you get that 12-hour fast overnight, that's also really important for your digestive system. We've got something called the migrating motor complex that comes in at night.
I'm nodding, I have no idea what that means.
It's basically like, think about a giant broom that comes in and sweeps out all your debris.
Right.
So all your used up enzymes and hormones and
Like a
things
cleaning
like that,
process, right?
Yeah, end up happening hanging around in your gut. The broom comes in and it sweeps them through, but it can only do that away from food. So by having that 12-hour fast overnight, we allow that process to work properly as well.
Right, okay.
But it doesn't necessarily need to be more than that. The most important thing you can do when it comes to food timing is just eat around the same time every day.
So consistency is the key.
Yes.
Regardless of the specific protocol, consistency is the key.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So what's the difference between, so if you have been fasting for 12 hours, that 12 to 16 hours, that extra 4 hours, what are the benefits that are associated with that?
As far as I know, that would be the autophagy.
Right.
There are all sorts of studies coming out with intermittent fasting, and some people claim that the longer you go for, the better the effects. Other people claim that it's the opposite. And again, I think it's just because the studies are being done on different people. Different bodies are going to respond in different ways. So for some people, they can find that their energy is much better, their blood sugar levels are much more stable from fasting for longer. Other people find that their blood sugar levels go all over the place.
Do you think that there might be a natural link between that and kind of the metabolic typing that we were talking about in regards to ethnicity? Like, the last thing I want to do is have this heavily charged and overly kind of, any idea or kind of inclusion of like a racial stereotype. But in terms of the equatorial type versus the polar, in theory, to me anyway, it might make a little bit more sense that people whose heritage is around the equator were much more able to eat small and regularly, and kind of forage as they go, whereas someone from the polar type might, catch big game or a massive fish or, a seal or something, or whatever the hell kind of, animal that they were hunting then. And then that might be the vast majority of their calories for the next 3 days. So would someone of a polar type respond better to a longer fasting window, possibly? Or is that just a theory, but there's no data on that?
That's what I was about to say. I can see the theory behind it, so I would be inclined to agree that yes, in theory, that would make more sense. However, in practice, what I have found with a lot of people that are more protein types, so the polar people, is that they tend to have less stable blood sugar. So they would actually need to eat more frequently. However, another caveat, that could be because they haven't been eating that way when they come to me.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So the body doesn't have all the resources to be able to cope with intermittent fasting. So basically, we don't know.
Basically. Long story short, it's a shrug. It's a shrug from us. No, I mean, I think it is. I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about pursuing an improvement of my own understanding of this is, again, I've seen it in certain clients, and I've seen it within myself, that a couple of tweaks can have a truly game-changing effect. Yeah. Much more so than a slight change of your training program can have an effect on your body. That's kind of proportionate, whereas these can almost have disproportionately massively positive improvements if you tweak something in the right way. You cut one tiny little thing out and it's like the amount better you feel is just game-changing.
That's precisely why I do much less personal training and much more nutritional lifestyle coaching these days. There
we go. Cool. A couple of other things I want to talk about, basically because I'm selfish and I have some questions for you that I'd love you to answer. What are your thoughts on a plant-based diet?
Right, okay. Honestly, let's go for this. I don't think it is healthy in the long term. I think short term, yes. Go for it. Experiment with plants. It's a great way to get more variety into your diet and things. But long term, it's really, really difficult to be able to get all the nutrients that you need for your whole body to work properly, but particularly for your digestive system to work properly when you aren't eating animal products. It's those B vitamins, the essential fats, like they make a really big difference to everything that's going on in the body. And I've worked with quite a few vegans who, obviously more extreme than plant-based, who have talked about how fantastic they feel in the first 6 months of being vegan. Yeah. And then they have come to me somewhere between year 2 and year 5, and they are broken. So
it's funny you mentioned that. I've had a lot of experience with that as well with my clients, of people being like, this is incredible. And it's kind of that term like the vegan honeymoon, where they engage in this protocol now of only eating plant-based, and they go through, some strange detoxes and stuff, and then they just end up feeling kind of, significantly more tired, weaker. And again, this isn't across the board, and we are omnivores, and it's not saying that this stuff is, I'm not vilifying it, but I'm saying that my experience of my friends, one of whom is she's a doctor. She's she's kind of like consultant level. She's a GP, incredibly intelligent and incredibly progressive as a doctor. And she went plant-based for a bit, felt a lot better, and then started to feel a lot worse. Yeah. And she kind of said the same thing. She was like, you do feel this kind of strange lightness and euphoria, but then you do start to develop deficiencies. And that was, and she kind of did it as a bit of an experiment for herself and her husband, and they both felt like that. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of very much consistent.
It's common for the aches and pains to kick in, the fatigue, the difficulty sleeping. Yeah, you see it a lot with veganism in the long term.
Yeah.
So the answer then might be, do it for 3 months, 6 months, and then switch.
As part of a detox protocol, maybe, or something.
Yeah, potentially. Or just listen to your body. And if your body is telling you, okay, now is the time to eat some more animal-based products, and now is the time to actually eat lighter, go with that. That's not a problem. But if you are going to go full vegan, get some support with it.
Yeah.
Get somebody who can help you, who can test you and can give you the supplements and things that you are going to need, because you're not going to be able to get it all on a vegan diet.
2 things on that. Slight digression in terms of listening to your body. I agree that is the case. One of the things that I've said to a couple of my clients a lot is it's better for you to spend a bit of time following the like general good principles to get your body a little bit more into kind of homeostasis before, because I don't think that everyone can trust their own body if their own body is just telling them to eat more sugar all the time.
Yeah.
So do you think there's a point that you have to get to where that natural intuitive eating will actually be heard? Otherwise it's just like this animalistic need for more sugar.
Yeah, so this is going back to the single ingredient foods again. So take out the processed foods for a bit, have a while of just eating those decent quality single ingredient foods, and then you will start to notice differences within your macro ratios whilst you're going through this. But also be very careful of caffeine and alcohol, because they are going to screw up your body's feedback. So if you have a breakfast that's entirely wrong for you, but you have a cup of coffee with it, you're going to feel awesome regardless. You're going to be like, yeah, I've got tons of energy.
This is amazing.
I feel good.
I would feel like this all the time.
And you're going to be like, yes, that breakfast totally worked for me, but it's just the coffee masking it. And it's the same with alcohol.
Yeah.
If you find one really common thing that most people actually don't ever associate with food is, do you ever feel like you've got so many thoughts going on in your head at once that you can't quite grab hold of one long enough to really focus properly?
Like brain fog.
There's brain fog where everything just feels like it's kind of the other side of a barrier. And then there's this kind of busy head where everything is swirling around.
Loads of tabs open.
Focus on one thing properly. Both of those issues can be the food you've just eaten hasn't worked for you. If that occurs within like an hour or 90 minutes of lunch, then the lunch you've just eaten hasn't been right for you.
So that's a good indicator. So that's something that people can tune into and be like, how do I feel about an hour and a half after?
But if you're going to have alcohol, that's going to change that. Or if you're going to have coffee,
so the feed, but the messages that you're getting aren't accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. And the second thing I wanted to say was, obviously we're talking about different deficiencies and stuff. What do you think of companies like Thriver that do like quarterly blood tests? Are you familiar with these guys?
I know,
like deficiency testing.
Yeah, I know of Thriver. I've never actually worked with them, so I don't know a huge amount about their tests. It's a finger prick blood test as far as I know.
Yeah, so, Lancet, a couple of pots, squeeze.
Yeah, I've done similar ones for vitamin D tests and stuff. I don't see any problem.
So the idea, you think, can be quite helpful?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You can get a lot more. You can certainly go deeper with it than just like, what's my B12, what's my vitamin D, what's my thyroid. Like you can get a much deeper look from something like an organic acids test or a functional gut test, as an example. But not everybody needs to do that.
Okay, perfect. And coffee. Talk to me about your thoughts. Share your thoughts on coffee.
Coffee is one of these ones.
I'm scared, by the way. Just to let you know, I had a coffee just before Samantha got here because I was terrified that if I was drinking one here, you'd be like, you shouldn't have that. And I'm like, oh God.
Not at all.
Ruins everything.
I actually love coffee.
Thank the Lord
but coffee doesn't love me, so I have to limit the amount of coffee I have.
I'm sorry to hear that. To what? How frequently?
I aim for no more than 3 a week.
Okay.
Sometimes it creeps up a bit, sometimes it's less, but that's my rough. Yeah, I can cope with that and feel good.
Sometimes it creeps up to 30? Or...
No, it creeps up to 5 sometimes, and that's when I know, because it'll affect my sleep.
Right.
And I'll start getting a little bit antsy during the day.
Regardless of what time you have it?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, I only ever have it in the morning. I can't even have a cup of tea at like past about 12:30, 1 o'clock. I can't have a cup of tea. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm not sleeping that night.
Really? Wow.
Really caffeine sensitive. So there are some people like me who probably should just stay away from the coffee, and then there are other people who do really well on it, like the kind of people who can knock back an espresso after dinner and then go and sleep.
Yeah.
Like, super envious of those people. I want to be one of those people.
So assuming that there are some of those people that, you know, that have like 8 coffees a day and they're listening to this now and they go, oh, that's me, that means I'm fine.
No.
Is that because their body can just handle it, or is it because like their receptors are just so burnt out?
This is the thing. 8 coffees a day for anyone isn't going to be working.
Yeah, this can be, yeah.
1 or 2 max. I mean, even if you are the most caffeine tolerant person, you probably don't really need more than, 2 is a real max, I would say, in a day. There have been a lot of studies that show the benefits of caffeine in terms of long-term brain health. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to things like fighting Alzheimer's, dementia,
I've heard. Yeah, I'm familiar
Parkinson's,
with this idea.
Caffeine can be really good.
Wicked.
But it can also be fairly inflammatory. And I think the real issue that we have with caffeine is why you're drinking it. For most people, it becomes a crutch.
Yeah.
It's, all right, I feel rubbish. I'm lethargic, I'm tired, I feel like shite. So I'm going to have a coffee to get me through the next few hours. And then I'm going to need another one to get me through that and get me through that. And it's not addressing the underlying problem. It's just constantly putting this plaster over the top. And if you find yourself needing 8 plasters in a day, you've got an underlying issue.
Yeah. There's an issue. There's a problem there.
Yeah.
And I noticed that, you know, in and of myself, and I'm a lot better with it now, and I have a lot less. So I have, you know, one maybe kind of mid-morning or kind of just after lunch, and some days I'll have a second one, but that's almost fairly in kind of quick succession. But I won't have one after about, you know, 3:30, 4 p.m. ever, and I'd never have more than 2, and that is significantly better than what I used to have. And I feel as though my energy is just kind of nicely kind of consistent and regulated now, as opposed to, instead of just cruising along here, having 8 coffees a day doesn't make you feel better the whole time. You feel like crap, and what you end up doing is having a coffee to feel okay for a couple of hours. You don't have it to feel amazing. You literally just have it to feel remotely normal again. Like you need it. It is a dependency.
Well, that's what's been really interesting with me lately with coffee, is that where it's obviously crept up to more than 3 times a week occasionally, I have now found that I want coffee. I'll be like, ooh, that coffee, I really could do with a coffee. And that's never happened to me before.
Yeah.
And the retreats that I work on are all completely caffeine free. So every few months I'm going and having absolutely no caffeine for 2 or 3 weeks. And it's always been a breeze. I've never had any kind of detox reaction or anything from it, because my caffeine's always been fairly low. But I certainly found I gave it up week before last. And I found myself for 3 or 4 days just going, I want a coffee. I really want a coffee. I really want a coffee. And for me, that's a sign of I'm over relying on a particular food or drink.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I'm craving it, there's something else happening. Why do I want that coffee? What does it give me? And that's another thing that we get to look at a lot of the time with behaviours with foods and drinks, is it's all well and good us sitting here saying, eat the best quality single ingredient foods, this is good for your body, blah, blah. Most people know this. Most people know exactly what to do, but it's getting ourselves to actually do it. And one of the key things we can do is sit there and think, okay, so I really want the sugar, I really want the coffee, I really want the wine. Why? What does that give me? What am I looking for from that? And by answering that, we'll be able to work out what's actually happening with our body. So is it that you're wanting the coffee because a lot of people claim they just really like the taste of coffee? We all like the taste of coffee. If you're craving it, there's something else happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it that you want the energy? Is it that you're trying to work out and you are working out too hard at the moment? You are pushing yourself too much, more than your body has the resources for. Is it because you didn't sleep very well last night and you're trying to make it through the day today? Is it because you don't really want to do the work that's in front of you, so you're finding it hard to focus and you think a coffee will fix that? The underlying issues are the bits that get to be dealt with, not the coffee. Make sense?
100%. Wise words. Yeah, that does make sense. I have one more topic.
Go for it.
Lectins. I feel a lot when I've messed up, when I've kind of tweaked around a few different diets. This is why I was never particularly enamored with the idea of a 100% plant-based diet. If I was to go, 80% plants or 80% animal foods, I genuinely believe my digestive system would feel better with 80% animal foods, because I feel less I feel fewer bad reactions to different meats and different fish and eggs and things than I do to certain plants. Are the things that seem to mess up my energy and just make me feel incredibly bloated. So can you spend a minute or so talking about what lectins are and what the theory is behind whether or not they're bad for us?
Yeah, so there's more than just lectins in this conversation, by the way. But lectins are a protective mechanism that plants have. So if you think about a cow or a sheep, right? It can run away. That's its defense.
That's its defense mechanism, yeah. It has legs.
Exactly. You want to hunt it, it runs away, or it charges you. That's it defending itself. Plants don't have that option. They can't just dig up their roots and run away from a human who's hunting them. So they develop these systems of protection where they create some toxic compounds within them so that anything that comes along to eat them hopefully doesn't come back and eat them a second time. Now, there are some foods that don't have these things because they want their seeds to be spread. So if we think about something like fruit wants birds, wants humans, wants any kind of animal to come along and eat it and then spread its seeds all over. So they're not going to have
I'm just going to check the camera.
Go for it. They're not going to have as many of these toxic compounds as, say, something like leafy greens.
Right, okay.
So that means that when we go to eat them, again, we have these little micro doses of lectins, of oxalates, of all these other different toxic compounds that the body then has to deal with. And if the body, again, is under stress, or if digestive function isn't at 100%, which for most of us it's probably not, then we can get impacted by them. So that's probably why you find plants much more difficult. Okay,
interesting. So in theory, my body, if I kind of transported myself to caveman times, but I was exactly the same kind of physiology and microbiome, I would be more okay with them, but it's because we have so many other digestive stressors that might just kind of push it over the edge.
Probably, but then we can also look at the way that we farm and things like that as well, and I will get quite political if we go on about that for too long. It also makes a big difference to how much nutrient we get from our food as well. So it's a big story, but I think there's definitely something in lectins. I mentioned oxalates as well because they're another one that a lot of people have problems with. I actually have an oxalate issue, so I have to be quite careful with chocolate, leafy greens, potatoes, sweet potatoes, those kind of things, because they have a lot of oxalate that the body needs to bind and take out afterwards once we've eaten and assimilated these foods. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So lots of stuff on what to do, lots of stuff on when to do it, and just some, things that I was selfishly curious about. To wrap up then, if people are going to leave here and they could apply 3 learnings or 3 tips or 3 new strategies to the way in which they eat and look after their gut health, what would they be?
How you eat, eating mindfully.
Eating mindfully, okay.
Big thing. If we think about our digestive system as being, like I mentioned it to you in a voice note, do you remember the game Mousetrap?
Yes.
The board game where this thing triggers this thing, which then flips the ball over to here and blah, blah, blah. That's how I picture the digestive system. If one thing somewhere doesn't work, it doesn't trigger the next thing to work and the next thing to work. And our digestion actually starts in our senses. So we touch the food, we smell the food, we see the food. That then triggers the brain to go, okay, so we're going to eat soon. That then tells our saliva glands to start producing saliva. That's our first breakdown, is our saliva. The enzymes that are in the saliva. Exactly. So we start to break down protein, particularly in the saliva in our mouths. Once we've produced saliva, that then triggers the stomach to produce more hydrochloric acid, so that we've got the right amount of acid to be able to get rid of all the pathogens like the bad bacteria, the parasites and all those kind of things that we're constantly taking in. And when we get the right pH balance in the stomach, that then triggers the pancreas to start secreting some enzymes to break things down in the small intestines. So, and that carries on the whole way through the digestive system. So if we're not doing that first thing of taking the time to feel the food, to smell it, to look at it, to make it look nice on the plate, and we're not sitting quietly with that food, none of the rest of the stuff happens properly. And then we end up with partially digested food hanging around in our digestive system, which then leads to bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowths, which are your reasons for a lot of your IBS type symptoms and things like that as well.
Less nutrient absorption, I assume, as well.
Loads less nutrient absorption.
Okay. So that being the first tip of like eat mindfully.
Yeah.
So this is something I've started doing now, and I literally, when I have meals, and I have them literally right here on the table, and just behind the camera, you guys won't be able to see, but there's 2 big windows that are currently blacked out. I'm just there. My neighbours must just think I'm like the biggest loser ever, because I'm just on this table on my own. I'm not listening to music, not doing anything, and just eat. And I'm doing this because it was Lee Brandon, a mutual friend of ours, that basically that said, like, in terms of nutrient uptake and everything else, you are like quadrupling the positive effect if you're not doing anything else. Just concentrate on the food itself.
Yeah.
And that's had, and I've kind of done that intermittently over the last few years, but it's definitely I'm a phase in now.
Well, the other part of that is, if you think about the 2 sides of your autonomic nervous system, we've got our sympathetic side and our parasympathetic side. Sympathetic is our fight or flight response. That's our active side. And our parasympathetic is our rest and digest. If we are not in that restful, relaxed position, our digestive system doesn't work.
Okay, so mindful eating.
Yes.
Amazing tip. 2 more for us.
Single ingredient whole foods.
Single ingredient whole food, yeah.
Which we've already discussed a lot. Optimizing circadian rhythms. So this is where I mentioned before about eating at the same time every day. Having a set wake up time, a set go to sleep time, and set food times throughout your day just help the natural rhythms of your body. If you can then add some outdoor time in daylight and nature on top of that as well, it communicates everything back to our brain to say, right, this is the time when this should happen, this is the time when that should happen. The healthier that rhythm is, it's called our circadian rhythm, the healthier that rhythm is, the more your digestion can work when it's supposed to work.
Amazing.
So yeah.
Spectacular. If people want to know more about this stuff and they want to speak to you directly about it, or possibly look into some of your services, where can they find you?
www.healthyhappyhot.com.
Healthyhappyhot.com. I love that.
Samantha G Health Coach on Instagram. Yeah, they're probably the best 2 places.
Wicked. I'll put the links to all of these down in the descriptions below.
Fab, thanks.
Thank you so much for this. That has been wicked, actually. That has been, I've learned a lot. It's been a topic that I'm increasingly interested in, because I've said loads of times, I do believe it is the linchpin for, health and happiness and everything. We didn't even get on to, serotonin in the gut and blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that we could do, which means that we're just going to have to get you back here for another one.
I can talk about this stuff for about 3 days straight. So yeah, you tell me what you
That'll be a long old episode, won't it? And you better watch every single second. I'm watching you.